This letter was never meant to fall into the wrong hands. But if you're hearing this, the time has come. It is dated March 1983, signed Dr. Lawrence Arkwood, a former researcher at the Princeton Consciousness Laboratory. 1 month after writing this document, he vanished, without a trace. The official story, a heart attack. The unofficial one, he knew too much. The letter was found inside an antique copy of the Divine Comedy, tucked between the pages where the 9th circle of hell begins. This is not just a confession. This is a report on a scientific experiment that recorded the first 10 minutes after death. The experiment was conducted in absolute secrecy. It was called Project 47, Gateway. The goal, to record neural brain activity during clinical death and beyond. Dr. Arkwood was the project lead. He didn't believe in the soul, not until he saw the data. Experiment start, 0 hour, 0 seconds, heart stops, breathing ceases. Medically, death has occurred. Monitors flatline, but the EEG remains active. For the first 5 seconds, silence. At 6 seconds, an anomaly. A sudden, brief spike in the temporal lobe, the region tied to perception, emotion, and visual imagery. One might assume these were final impulses, but they didn't fade, they intensified. At 13 seconds, rhythmic pulses begin in the frontal cortex, the area responsible for higher cognition, memory, self-identity, time analysis, and causality. These weren't random flashes, they were structured, resembling patterns seen during deep self-awareness, like peak epiphanies or meditation. This was the moment, the patient later recounted, when the separation began. After successful resuscitation, he described it. First, I heard a hum, deep, like a distant engine, but not mechanical, more like an internal vibration. Then, absolute silence. Not emptiness, but as if something turned off so I could hear something else. Deeper, the report notes that during this interval, the EEG displayed faint but coherent signals, previously observed only during REM sleep, when vivid dreams occur. But this patient wasn't asleep. He was dead by every physiological metric. And yet, his consciousness, the data suggested, was entering a new state. Not fading, transitioning, not an end, a beginning. 62 seconds. The brain is dead by all medical standards, yet the EEG still registers activity, not chaotic, but structured, particularly in areas linked to visualization and spatial awareness. These waves resemble REM sleep patterns, but here, they're dozens of times more intense and sustained. The patient, later revived, recalled, I felt no body, no pain, no panic. I didn't try to breathe. It wasn't necessary. It was like I remembered I could exist without a body. It didn't feel strange. It felt natural. I was in a corridor. Darkness, but not frightening. Deep, soft, infinite, yet not empty. I was guided by thought. I didn't walk. I didn't fly. I just moved because I remembered. And with each memory, the space unfolded further. I wasn't finding a path. I was recalling it. 3 minutes, 47 seconds. A sudden surge in hippocampal activity. This brain region handles memory, especially spatial navigation and autobiographical recall. The instruments detected a pattern, as if the brain was processing vast data arrays in milliseconds. Dr. Arkwood wrote, "The precision of this moment is indescribable. The brain seemed to unlock an archive of the entire life, not in images, in full sensation. It wasn't recalling, it was reliving, every emotion, every glance, simultaneously." The patient confirmed, "My life didn't flash before my eyes. It unfolded around me, as if every moment happened at once. I wasn't analyzing, I was simply in it." This wasn't poetic metaphor. It was raw neuroscientific fact. At death, the brain, instead of shutting down, seemed to access memory outside time. 6 minutes 15 seconds. The EEG captured a rare phenomenon: complete hemispheric synchronization. Normally, the brain's left and right sides operate with slight lag, logic and intuition, analysis and imagery. But here, they functioned as one, flawless, like mirrors reflecting a single source. This state had previously been observed only in deep meditators, or those experiencing peak spiritual episodes. Except here, the patient was clinically dead. No pulse, no breath, no pupil response, only cold flesh and signals from the brain's depths. At this point, he spoke of an eerie presence. At first, I thought I was alone. Then I felt watched, not by eyes, not from outside. It was as if all I'd ever been had become transparent. I wasn't judged, I wasn't assessed, but I was seen, fully. Every thought, every choice, even those I'd forgotten or buried. It was like being understood utterly, without words, without excuses. Just all of me laid bare before this attention. I'd call it a being, but it had no form, no voice, no face, just the knowing. I'm not alone, and everything I've done matters. Dr. Arkwood termed this the observer phenomenon, a phrase previously used only in quantum physics and esotericism. Here, it became literal. He noted, the patient's consciousness interacted with something beyond physiological explanation. This wasn't projection, it wasn't memory, it was an encounter, and not within consciousness, but above it. An underlined passage reads, if the brain has ceased function, what made contact with this attention? And where did this meeting occur? Arkwood abandoned neurophysiological explanations. He added, what we call conscience in life may be but a faint echo of this encounter, and perhaps here, for the first time, a person learns who they truly are. 9 minutes 3 seconds. The EEG shows a sharp frequency drop, nearly flatlining. Yet, a second before silence, a brief but potent, high-amplitude wave erupts. Researchers dubbed it the clarity surge. It lasted under 0.7 seconds, but within it, activity rivaled a fully awake mind in deep focus. The patient described, everything froze. Time stopped existing. I didn't feel it as before or after. All was simultaneous. Every state, thought, feeling, all happening at once. Then it dissolved, like stepping out of a confined room into boundless light. But this light didn't blind. It was clarity, awareness. The strangest part, I felt I'd always known this place, like finally coming home. I didn't know my name, but I knew what I was. Dr. Arkwood noted the data defied all known physiological states. No dream, hallucination, or residual brain activity could explain such signal patterns. He wrote, this isn't sleep, isn't trance, it's something else. The patient's consciousness wasn't fading, it was becoming pure perception. The section's final line. If this isn't proof of continuation, it's at least a signpost, a transition not into void, but into another form of presence. 10 minutes, absolute silence. Equipment registers total signal cessation, no impulses, no waves. The brain is mute, officially, full death. Yet the patient claimed this was when the real began. It was like birth, but not into a body, into something greater. I felt myself dissolve into boundlessness, yet I didn't vanish. I became everything. It was as if all I'd thought was me, fears, attachments, roles, were a costume. And now, I'd taken it off. There was no more me and the world. All was one field, no borders, no time, only knowing. Dr. Arkwood, despite his materialist background, he used the word spirituality, not as dogma, but as a term for an altered state of being. The patient describes an experience irreducible to neurochemistry. Its structure isn't linear, isn't symbolic. It's fundamental. He isn't dreaming. He is. Further in the report, if we accept consciousness doesn't vanish but transitions, then death isn't an end. It's a threshold, and all our fear of it, just a byproduct of narrow tools and beliefs. From this point, Arkwood abandoned conventional terminology. He wrote, "Science and spirituality aren't enemies. They're two languages for one reality. And perhaps, at death, they finally speak in unison." After the experiment, all materials were classified. Participants were silenced. Some researchers were reassigned. Data confiscated. Officially, Project Gateway never existed. Names were scrubbed from records. Dr. Arkwood's biography was edited. Public databases list him as dead from cardiac arrest. But those who knew him insist he was healthy. No signs of illness. 1 month after filing his final report, he disappeared. Permanently. This letter, revealing the truth, was found years later, hidden in the lining of an old book. Perhaps his way of preserving it. The church called it heresy. Academia, a hoax. Yet independent studies on near-death experiences increasingly report identical patterns. Clinically dead patients, unrelated, describe the same phenomena: separation from the body, timelessness, encountering a presence, and the unshakable knowing consciousness continues. Arkwood wrote, "Consciousness isn't a brain product. It uses the brain, like radio waves use a receiver. If the receiver breaks, the signal doesn't die. It persists, just beyond detection. If true, this changes everything. We live avoiding death, taught to fear it as void, as cessation. But what if we feared wrong? What if death isn't an end, but a beginning? Not extinction, but return." Dr. Arkwood wrote, "We fear death not because we understand it, but because we don't understand life. We mistake the temporary self for the one who watches within. But the real I isn't a name, a story, a body. The real I is attention, presence, consciousness, and it doesn't die, it awakens. So the question shifts, not what comes after death, but are we truly alive before it? If consciousness transcends, if something lies beyond, then perhaps what matters isn't what awaits there, but who we become here. Maybe the real nightmare isn't death. It's a life lived without meaning. Maybe true death is forgetting who you are. And maybe, after the last breath, we don't vanish, we just wake up. If you've read this far, perhaps you feel it too. Something exists beyond textbooks, doctrines, and tidy explanations. Truth doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers, between lines, between worlds. This isn't just a story about death. It's an invitation to ponder life, who we are, and what happens when, seemingly, it all ends. If this resonates, press like. It's not just a button, it's a sign. You're listening. Subscribe. More silenced topics lie ahead. Because truth isn't always convenient, but it always liberates. Now, comment below. Do you believe consciousness survives death? If so, what would you take beyond the threshold? A memory? A loved one's voice? Or just the certainty you lived meaningfully? Remember, sometimes one question can awaken what slept a lifetime. And sometimes, one video reminds you, you are more than you've been told.